What is Starfleet? I think Starfleet is the friends we made along the way. Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Episode 7 of Season 3. What is Starfleet? Oh, boy. Okay. There's a lot in this. I guess I'll start with the fact that while this is presentation-wise a gimmick episode, which it's felt like a fair amount of this season's episodes have been gimmick episodes, this is one of the less intrusive gimmicks, and they do, for the most part, keep to it. There's one particular, well, there's a lot of issues with this. There's one specific issue with the presentation, but it's one of those things where you read into it and it kind of fixes itself if you think more about it. But then at that point, I think I'm putting more thought into it than the show did. But for the most part, the presentation is quite solid. They commit to a distinctly different shooting style taken from, yes, the roving drone camera that has been established in previous episodes, because this is Ortegas's brother, who's made this documentary that you are ostensibly watching by watching this episode. And so there is that, but a lot of it is, awkward angles from, inside terminal panels or, from up in the corners, security footage. And it commits to that pretty well. There's like one or 2 points where I feel like it breaks down, but that's also towards the tail end where you've either bought into it or you haven't. And that's the point where you can kind of get away with it. Though I would have liked a fuller commitment, but whatever. But yeah, for the most part, the presentation of it is pretty solid. It's an interesting way to do it. And as much as it's a gimmick, it is a solid gimmick for what this is trying to do. So let's start with the fact that the questions that are being asked very upfront and very straightforwardly by Beto, Umberto, I think they call him Beto, Ortega's his brother. The questions that he's asking are questions worth asking and are questions that have been grappled with by the fandom for decades. Is the Enterprise an exploratory vessel, or is it a military vessel? Is Starfleet a colonial project, or is it about research and knowledge? Because those aren't the same things. And those are questions worth asking. It's a shame that the episode has no interest in answering them. Nor does the documentary that we're watching. That's sort of the thing that I alluded to a little bit earlier. This is a terrible documentary. Like, it's bad. He's a real bad documentary filmmaker. This is awful work for a multitude of reasons. Starting right off the bat with, like, the little bits we get with his questions, how confrontational he is with a lot of the questions that he's asking. And also, just as a presentation, you open with these questions. Is this colonialism? Is this a military? Is this in fact things that Starfleet claims to not be? And it literally never answers those questions. So, like, here's the I'm about to put way more thought into this than the people who made it did. While it is fully valid and very much a thing that can happen in the process of making a documentary, that you go in intending to ask and get answers to certain questions, but what you come away with from the interviews or footage or whatever else you get doesn't really address the questions or tell the story you thought you were going to get, and you have to reshape your entire notion because what you got told a different story. That is a valid thing that happens. But you don't see that in the end results. You don't leave an opening for a documentary that asks questions that the documentary isn't even going to try and answer. But in a way, and again, I know I'm putting more thought into this than the freaking show did. In a way, it almost kind of works because all this stuff that is, kind of sensitive. It's been signed off on by Starfleet for him to use all this security footage. And yeah, if they saw his general notion of what he wanted to put together and quickly realized it's a terrible documentary, but it also like makes us look good by the end, yeah, sure, let him do that. Like, he's terrible at his job, but it's good for us. I mean, that is a level of thought that I can guarantee did not go into this. Now, I could get speculative about possibly what was more intended by this and what may or may not have been cut. This episode runs short, and it runs short by a bit. So, especially given, the timing of when it would have been written and or filmed, I could have some semi-educated guesses about the kind of things that were trimmed. I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole. I'm just going to say, broadly speaking, I suspect that a lot of the stuff that was trimmed out were a lot more the specifics of the conflict between the two planets that are at war. Because all right, to compare it real quick to Doctor Who Interstellar Song Contest, which I hated and was a travesty. Part of why that was as gross as it was is because it had so many direct parallels to what is currently going on with Israel and Palestine that it really, it was not prepared to handle those topics well, and it made everything worse. I would not be shocked if this had a lot more specifics in it, but cut them to make it just a lot more general, because we know shockingly little about the conflict that is supposedly sparking everything off. Really, the only piece of data that we get is that the side that that Starfleet and the Federation are helping has way more casualties than the other side, like preposterously more, like under 200,000 versus over 9 million. Like, that's a ridiculous disparity. But that's literally all we know. Are these numbers for combatants only? Do they include civilians? I mean, my gut instinct is, yeah, to get numbers that high, you probably would. But also, I don't know. They don't tell us. They don't really tell us what it's over. We know which side theoretically invaded the other one's territory, and the Federation is helping the one that was invaded, and the one that has had more losses. But like, that's it. We have zero indication of any history between these places or anything else. And I suspect that there was more of that, and it was cut because it probably tied too closely to specific conflicts. And it may or may not have been Israel, Palestine. It could have been Ukraine, Russia that it was more closely tied to. But ultimately, for my purposes, it doesn't matter, other than to note, I think they realized that they were going to step in it if they let the specificity be in there. But it's not great regardless, because there's a whole bunch of other problems. So, there's this sort of interstellar moth thing. Actually looks quite good. I don't want my description to sound dismissive. Called the Jikaru, if I'm remembering that correctly, that the Federation has agreed to transport to the war zone. And most of the crew doesn't know why this is being done. And this is a point emphasized by the documentary. Most of the crew is not questioning these orders, even though they do not know exactly what they are being asked to do or exactly why. And the documentary initially is kind of framing this as a bad thing. It also helps with the overall notion that this is more of a military than anything else. Because yes, absolutely, in a military, you are going to get orders that you don't know a lot of the background on. You just have to trust that the people above you know what they're doing with a lot of stuff. Should that be the case? Something that is not supposed to be military? But anyways, this thing, okay. So it is a living sentient being that has been modified and had its brain chemistry altered to help make it into a weapon. And once the crew realizes this and they establish some means of communication directly with this thing, they find out that it wants to die. Okay. It is it is a difficult and dicey thing to have, like anything in a show or a movie, deal with a character who has been in some way altered, traumatized, or damaged, who feels that their best option is to die. I'm not going to say there's no way to make that work. And I know that people who are inclined to defend those kinds of writing choices are generally going to say, like, well, isn't that like character agency? That's what they want. Like, okay, yeah, but first of all, it is a character. This is an artificial circumstance constructed by a writer. So while we do talk about character agency, we still need to recognize that this was not a real scenario with a real person who was demanding real agency over their life. So that's the first thing. But then beyond that, I think the mistake that a lot of shows that try and tackle this make is that they have it involve a guest character. And in this case, the thing's barely a character. But the only times that I have felt it was even slightly defensible, this particular plot point and storyline, was when it was a character who we knew well in advance of whatever happened, so we understood them enough as a person that it would follow logically that that would be their response to something like that. But that's a hard thing to do that takes a lot of time. In most places, don't bother. And to be clear, even doing it that way, you could still step in it. And if you're unclear as to what the problem is, it's just generally not a good message to normalize the idea that a sentient living being, if it is too damaged, it should just die. And again, like the writers covering for that is like, oh, but it wants to die. Like, yeah, because you decided it wanted to die. Again, decision of writers. You can talk about character agency all you want. It is still ultimately the decision of writers. The characters do not exist in a vacuum and the writers have no control. Well, that's what the character would do. I mean, what? I have no control over that. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And you decided to do a storyline where a creature was so damaged and so hurt and so traumatized that it just wanted to die. And that is ableist and harmful, just as a message. It's one of those things where, again, I'm not going to say there is no possible way to ever make that work, but if you're going to, it takes a hell of a lot more effort and time put into it than this bothers to do. And even if you do put in that time and effort, it's also one of those things that is kind of dangerous because of how common it is. This is a very typical plot point, and it is less common to see characters go through this kind of traumatic stuff happening to them and decide, I will work to, better, make my life better and protect others from the same things. Like, this angle happens a lot. So there's that. That ain't great. There is the Enterprise taking this overall very moralistic, we will not condone and cooperate this. Although, interestingly, I did note they bothered to get go ahead from Starfleet, meaning that this can't even be a case being argued where the crew is putting what they feel is morally right over their orders, because they check in with Starfleet and get Starfleet's okay to change what their orders are. So we can't have literally any part of Starfleet culpable for this at all. Oh, as soon as they found out, they were like, yes, you are correct, moral arbiter Christopher Pike. So Starfleet just gets completely off the hook on this, which means that the side that they were going to be helping in this war is left on the hook. Now, again, we know almost nothing about the specifics. However, we do know that they are losing way more people at a much higher rate, and that prior to finding out the specifics of this weapon, the Federation felt they were worth helping and is now removing their weapon. And I'm not going to get into an argument with you over whether or not they should or shouldn't have taken this weapon away. Again, that whole thing is muddled by the fact that it's sentient and it's asking, like, that's a whole quagmire of a thing I've already kind of touched on. But let's just deal with the fact that the Federation agreed, we will help you move a weapon to help you fight. And then they decided, actually, we think that's a weapon you shouldn't have. Which would be one thing, except we get no real indication of what Starfleet and the Federation are going to do for them instead. Like, Pike says, we will help you, but in another way. That is freaking useless. That's words with no specificity of what the Federation and Starfleet will do for these people that they have just removed the way that they were going to try and fight back against a superior force, which does tap into some of the nonsense that Interstellar Song Contest did, because it is this notion of, oh, you're losing, you're the oppressed people, you are vastly outnumbered. Yeah, well, you still went too far. You're fighting back wrong, and we are going to super judge you for that, and we are not even going to bring up or in fact even see anything of the superior oppressing force. They are literally completely absent. They are named only, and that's it. So the only people we have to judge are the people who are getting wiped out at like a 90, by a factor of 90 or whatever. Like, maybe I did the math wrong. I don't care. Like, I'm like, what the hell? It's so... Again, not a new problem. Like, I will point to Interstellar Song Contest, but also, you know, the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and like lots of stuff have done this. You're fighting against oppression wrong. Oh, piss off. And look, I'm not saying that there's no such thing as a line that you shouldn't cross, even if you are trying to fight an oppressor. But how many times are we going to do the story where the people who are being oppressed are fighting back wrong? How many times are we going to freaking do that? Stop! And then, oh my God. Then comes the absolutely atrocious thing that made this entire exercise worthless. We find out that Beto didn't really sincerely care about whether or not this was a military force. No, instead he had an axe to grind because he blamed Starfleet for taking his sister away. Simply, a reminder, his sister is alive. Like, yes, she suffered an injury, but she is alive, and she volunteered to be here. But because he has an axe to grind with Starfleet, he came in wanting to tear them down. F*** you. And like, the only way that could have worked is if the questions he was asking at the front end were completely one-sided or not questions worth asking. But they were. They were actually questions worth asking. They were ideas worth exploring. But you don't validate that at all. Instead, you go, this person who was questioning whether or not we're really the good guys, yeah, no, he had some other issues. Yeah, he wasn't coming to that issue with good faith. What the hell? What the actual hell, man? And look, I've seen a case where like small tweaks can make the difference on this. Because like I'm watching the Battlestar Galactica reboot for a podcast that I do with Jesse Gender, and we did an episode recently that had an aspect of it that basically dealt with this supposed documentary team on the Galactica. And initially there was all this concern that it wasn't making them look very good. But then by the end, it basically ended the exact same way that this does. And I'll get into the specifics of that in a minute when, you know, we see kind of what this documentary ended up looking like. And it looked pretty much the same in terms of this. Yeah, there's some stuff, but boy, these people sure care. They sure work hard. And I think we should trust them. But spoiler for middle of season 2 of like a 20-year-old show. But we find out that the documentarian is a Cylon who are the villains, or at least they are as far as I've gotten into the show. I expect things will get more complicated. I haven't finished it yet. It's my first time watching it. Don't be a spoilerific jackass about that. But my point is, at the end of that episode, we find out, oh, the person who made the unquestioning propaganda is one of the bad guys, which immediately puts a light of, by implication, unquestioning propaganda is also bad. Because it serves the needs of the villains who actually want to dismantle all of this stuff. So that was a small little addition, literally at the very end of the episode, that made it work. And honestly, a little moment here with, like, I don't know, some random admirals at Starfleet seeing this and deciding, you know, having a little conversation about, so does this make us look good? Well, by the end it does. And I think fewer people will question us now. Not that I would ever expect Star Trek to actually do that, but without that, this is, oh, cripes. Okay, so I got to talk about what the actual conclusion of this documentary even is. Because you might think that thing I did at the front, that the real Starfleet was the friends we made along the way, was a joke. It's not. It's basically the exact conclusion of this documentary. Because it's like, well, what makes Starfleet great? What is Starfleet? It's the people. It's the system. If the system is fucked, then yes, good people can try and steer it in the right direction. But let's keep in mind, none of this would have gone this way if Uhura hadn't been super insistent on trying to make contact with this damn thing. They would have just followed their orders and done the thing, and then, like, none of this would have happened. So even the argument that it's like, oh, it's good because of the people. Okay, yes, but your own footage demonstrates that the institution itself has problems. And thank goodness it has good people here, because they are making up for the flaws of the system. Boy, we better fix those flaws in the system so we aren't dependent on always having good people to make the right decisions, because some ships aren't going to have good people on them. No, let's just end on a note of, thank goodness everybody in Starfleet is great. What the f***? It's insulting, and it's extra insulting again because this opens by asking legitimate questions that the answer of, well, Starfleet's great because the people in it are great, is not a response to any of those questions. The f*** is this? God, this is awful. And the thing is, I speculated that a lot of stuff was cut out of it. It's probably better for it. I bet you if there was more specificity that could tie this as being a cleaner allegory to an actual conflict, I'd probably be even more upset. Because trust me, that wasn't the only problem with Interstellar Song Contest, but it made it worse. Made it a lot worse. So this probably could have been worse than it is. And it already sucks. And it's a shame, because the visual presentation is quite good, and the effects are great. The performances are solid. Doesn't matter. It's in service of whatever the hell this was. God damn, man. Give up documentary filmmaking, kid. You suck. You're real bad at it. Don't ever do that again. Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Episode 7. What do you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if it can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Tried to do it in one breath. Those all help me out, but don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so just come on back next time you need a break. God damn, man. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Fulla, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Movie Turtle, Oliver B, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Mary Mello, Becky Sparks, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Pal Barabajoggle, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. Don't worry, the rats are all fine, but my rat wrangler is not here right now, and I thought we could have Archie say hi. Or not.